Mambo Espresso Talk Today community, and Aquaba to the Espresso Talk Today show. Welcome to the Espresso Talk Today show. I'm Amma Robin, host of this great and groundbreaking podcast show where we get curious and we get courageous about any and all issues affecting Black people. The Espresso Talk Today podcast show is a Black empowerment podcast show. We aim to empower ourselves and each other in every single show. The team discusses lots of issues and events focusing on the Black experience. And we've got a lot of experience. Some of the issues are obvious, some less so, but they're all important to Black people and to the Black community. Empowerment never waits. Let's get started. This week, I was trying really hard, this was not easy, to decide whether to do a show for the July 4th Independence Day holiday about, wait for it, white supremacist holidays, which the July 4th holiday is, along with other holidays. Or should I do a show about America's Black founders, the people who came to this imperfect union, or who were brought to it or forced in it, and worked tirelessly to make this a more perfect union? Well, with all of the erasure and denial of Black history that's happening right this very minute, like Black authored books being taken out of libraries, Black history classes being canceled as having no significant educational value, we know who said that, and the general devaluation of the contributions of Black Americans. Well, thinking about these issues, it made the question easier. So I decided, as I think you know already, to do the show about the courageous contributions of Black people. In my opinion, they should be honored as America's founders too. Like the white founders, America's Black founders risked their lives. They risked their fortunes, that varied, and they risked their sacred honor to make America into the country that it never really was, actually, but was promised to be. Like the Langston Hughes poem written in 1936, "Let America be America Again," Hughes writes in the first paragraph, "Let America be America again. Let it be the dream it used to be. Let it be the pioneer on the plain, seeking a home where he himself is free. America never was America to me." Wow, powerful words. America never was America to me either. And today's 2023 America is definitely not America to me, or maybe it's America on steroids. But I think that it's important to remind everyone that, especially people like Florida Governor Ron DeSantis, Texas Governor Greg Abbott, and the people who voted for them, that Black Americans built this country. We refined it, we developed it, we bettered it. And I believe that it will ultimately be Black Americans who will save this country, if it has any chance of being saved. So today's show is about Black American founders. Of course, we cannot talk about Black founders without talking about the Declaration of Independence and of all of its unfulfilled promises. We will also have to talk about white supremacy because this country was founded on it and has worked tirelessly to preserve it. Just got two more, actually, examples of that today. One from the Supreme Court. And The Black founders worked tirelessly and courageously to dismantle white supremacy. Many were killed in the process. We won't ever know everyone who died in the service of abolishing slavery and creating equality for all people, but we know that they did, and we honor them for it. Now I'm thinking about a Black Civil Rights Memorial holiday or a Black Founders holiday. I don't have the wording right yet, but I can see that there needs to be a holiday for the Black people that fought and died for this country. I'm really liking that idea. Some states actually still celebrate Confederate Heroes Day. I don't even know what to say about that. They are honoring people who fought for slavery and fought to maintain a white Christian male patriarchal system. This country is really on a very bad path when those holidays are still being celebrated. But honoring Black Americans who risked everything for freedom and equality, and not just for themselves, but for you and for me and for your children and for mine, is a noble cause. That is a really admirable cause. That's something to be honored. Those Confederate supporters can go, I'll just say, beep themselves. And DeSantis, Abbott, and the other fascist legislators can shove their racist and ignorant laws right where the sun doesn't bit. But okay, I'm going to tone it down a little bit, just a bit. Asante Sana for joining me today on this show celebrating America's Black founders. We'll begin with the preamble to the Declaration of Independence, and we'll take it from there. Okay, the show starts now. But let me just ask you first, have you ever visited the National Archives in Washington, D.C. and seen the original Declaration of Independence? If you haven't, I highly recommend it. Highly recommend it. I went to see it years ago as an adult, and I probably went to see it as a child. My parents were really big believers in history, but I don't remember much from my childhood. But then I went to college and became a history major. I learned a lot about history, American history, European history, what they call world history. Okay, won't digress on that one. Then I went to law school. And as ETT listeners know, I'm an avid reader. I read lots of books about American history, and yes, I have read the Declaration of Independence. This was a game changer for the world and for me. Let's hear it. We hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men are created equal. Let's stop there. We recognize these magical words from the Declaration of Independence, and they are magical, at least to me. When I read this paragraph from the Declaration of Independence, I get a little misty. I get a little teary-eyed. Thomas Jefferson's words are so poetic and so profound, but more than that, they're game changers. These words changed the relationship between people and their government. Leaving the divine right structure of European monarchies in which kings were on a higher, even divine level from the people, the Declaration of Independence said that the government was created to serve the people, not the other way around, and that the people were born with certain unalienable rights that the government could never take away. This was revolutionary in the mid-18th century. The founders were revolutionaries. They were not only creating a new government, they were throwing off their colonial ties, their shackles, the things that chained them as inferiors to Britain. Wow. I mean, really, wow. But we know that it's not the whole story. Even while Thomas Jefferson was writing these poetic words, he enslaved hundreds of human beings to a lifetime of servitude, as did many of the other founders who signed the Declaration following the axiom that all men are created equal. Others of those we call the founders did not enslave people, but they also never envisioned a society in which black people or any other people of color would or could live together as equals with white people. Slavery was a divisive issue to the degree that it threatened the very existence of the burgeoning new republic. So the founders failed to act decisively on the issue of slavery. It wasn't written into the original Constitution. Some founders wanted to keep it, others wanted it abolished. But it became the elephant in the law, shall we say, that hopefully would die a peaceful death as the country became more industrialized. That was a real failure of the American revolutionaries. But they also failed in developing a just and fair policy towards the indigenous population. Historian Joseph Ellis pointed out that the founders could not resolve how the legitimate rights of the indigenous people could ever be reconciled with the demographic tidal wave growing in the eastern colonies and eventually expanding out to the west. Their indecision planted the seeds of extinction that would take hold during Jefferson's tenure as president from 1801 to 1809. But even as they failed in the short term, they had a longer-term vision. In this, they didn't fail. Let me be specific. In this, they did not fail. As scholar David McCullough pointed out, the founders knew that they were fallible and imperfect. David McCullough is quoted as saying, here are the quotes, "They knew their own creation was imperfect and incomplete. The American experiment was from its start an unfulfilled promise. There was much work to be done. There were glaring flaws to correct, unfinished business to attend to, improvements and necessary adjustments to devise in order to keep pace with the onrush of growth and change and expanding populations." They didn't expect their work to stop. They knew that it would take much more work to continue creating a more perfect union. In one of John Adams's numerous letters to his feminist wife Abigail, he noted that, quote, "Our struggle has loosened the bands of government everywhere," end quote. And this is where we pick up the story. Who did John Adams and the other revolutionary founders include in the term "our struggle"? Without going into too much detail, though there's copious amount of evidence to support my next statement, the founders did not include women, this upset Abigail Adams, poor and uneducated people, which would have included John Adams's farmer father and illiterate mother, the indigenous peoples, well, they were just considered inconvenient, and certainly not the enslaved or free black population. Our struggle, according to Adams, who would later be the second president of the United States, included white and wealthy men. The white and wealthy wanted power over their lives, their fortunes, their sacred honor, and their destiny. They wanted freedom from England, and they knew that they needed the power first, then they would get their freedom, and they weren't wrong. In fact, they were quite insightful about this power-freedom paradigm. Wealthy and white men, the American patriots, continued to wield their considerable power and freedom over the other less powerful populations, such as the black population and the indigenous peoples, and of course women. Unfortunately, the American patriots, and that's in quotations, didn't see fit to encourage the black and native populations to seek power and freedom, or, of course, not to be resistors. Yet their work continued towards creating a more perfect union, and I believe that it focuses on the rights of the individual, the view that citizen is the highest office in the land. The ancient Greeks, who learned from the kingdoms of Africa, never lost sight of the individual, and neither should we, ever. This resulted in the Bill of Rights, drafted by James Madison, who would later become the fourth president of the United States. The Bill of Rights were drafted in 1789 and ratified in 1791, provided for individual rights and additional limitations on government power. The original founders failed in many ways, but they also paved the pathway for perfecting the Union. The later group of founders focused in different ways and in different times and under different circumstances on protecting and uplifting the individual, and the principles of life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness remained at the forefront of the movement. However, this later group of founders didn't focus on protecting the power of white and wealthy men, but instead envisioned expanding the rights and freedoms beyond this narrow and privileged group of founders. And black people, also founders and revolutionaries, are at the forefront of this movement. Abolition of slavery was one of their first goals. The American Project was not built on the idea that black people became free in 1776 or in any year thereafter, but that we are fighting for freedom, oftentimes from the economic and political interests that became free in 1776. It makes me wonder whether we even have anything to celebrate on July 4th. Certainly not our independence, nor our freedom. In this, we will be led by the words of the prophetic abolitionist and orator, Frederick Douglass. Power concedes nothing without a demand. It never did, and it never will. Find out just what any people will quietly submit to, and you have found out the exact measure of injustice and wrong which will be imposed upon them. And these will continue till they are resisted with either words or blows or both. Wow, Frederick Douglass is great. For the founders, we accept this kind of resistance as patriotism. But for black and native people, this resistance is treated as problematic. So our story focuses on the right fight for power and freedom. As we discussed in a previous episode on Juneteenth, we equated our emancipation with power and freedom. While the Reconstruction era was a time in which black people gained political and economic power, it did not compare with the competing power of the white population that viewed black political power as dangerous to the white existing power structure. And no, we are not all considered as American patriots and resistors. Race has been and continued to be an overriding separating factor in America. The infamous Dred Scott v. Sanford case in 1857, in which the Supreme Court decided that black people were not even American citizens and therefore were not protected under the Constitution, just confirmed that white males wanted to keep their power and deny the same sought-after freedom to black people. Then, of course, the Civil War started and finished, and the Union won, and black people were emancipated. Notice I said emancipated, not free. The subsequent passage of the 13th, 14th, and particularly the 15th Amendments also did not give the needed power to the growing African American population. In some ways, it actually undermined and diverted their rising power. But let's jump ahead to our continued fight for freedom. The early civil rights movement showed African Americans fighting for education, property, recognition, and even life. Lynching remained an active and not illegal form of terror throughout the country, and particularly in the southern states. The later movement showed the fight for equality in housing, jobs, and as citizens. Interesting that this movement was sparked by the lynching of 14-year-old Emmett Till in 1955, which gave a full view to the horrors of lynching to a country in which most whites denied having any knowledge of these types of killings. Civil rights activists were fighting for freedom with their freedom songs, freedom rides, freedom schools, and their compulsion to carry the gospel of freedom, as Dr. Martin Luther King explained in his letter from a Birmingham jail. We will reach the goal of freedom in Birmingham and all over the nation, because the goal of America is freedom. We focused on freedom, but power was what we needed. Now, those last two sentences were mine, that we focused on freedom, but power was what we needed. The Black Power movement was born. Dr. King later recognized that the Negro could not be free without power. These are his words. That's his term, the Negro. In quotes, he says, "We had it all wrong and mixed up in our country, and this has led Negro Americans in the past to seek their goals through love and moral suasion devoid of power." But Dr. King quickly learned that Black Americans have economic power that could lead to their freedom that we sought for so long. Marches were inspirational, boycotts were powerful, and we could use both. Dr. Ibram X. Kendi noted, "America is a story of powerful people struggling to keep their disproportionate amount of power from people who are struggling for the power to be free." And the founders in the Black community have not always recognized this relationship between power and freedom, but have always focused on freedom as a right for all Americans. In this freedom lies the right to, here we go, life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. For Black Americans, this has meant the fight against slavery, the fight for emancipation, the fight for the right to vote, the fight against segregation, the fight against lynching, the fight for equal rights and opportunities in housing and jobs, the fight against redlining, the fight against police violence and terror, the fight against white supremacy and white complicity, the fight against daily stripping of our humanity, and the fight to return home safely after driving to the store, buying Skittles and an Arizona iced tea, or simply playing in the park. This fight is all rolled up in the statement that Black Lives Matter, because Black lives did not matter to America's founders, nor to slave owners, or to many abolitionists, nor to white liberals who didn't want a disruption of their calm domestic lives by angry Black Americans who had fought in wars abroad but were denied America's promises at home. And the mattering of Black lives is undercut by the ill-informed response that all lives matter, because as we have seen, Black lives and all that this entails have mattered mostly only to other Black people and other Black founders. I think this is a good time to mention a few of people I think can be these later founders or some of the Black founders. Ida B. Wells, one of my favorites, who fought against lynching. W.E.B. Du Bois, who identified the color line and what it meant for Black people and other people of color. Frederick Douglass, who fought to abolish slavery and promote the dignity of Black people. Harriet Tubman, who fought to free Black enslaved people. Martin Luther King, who fought for civil rights and promoted civil disobedience as a tool for gaining civil and economic rights. Malcolm X, who fought for Black empowerment, Black pride, and human rights for all marginalized people. Thurgood Marshall, who fought for equality and equal rights in the court system. Carter G. Woodson, the father of Black history, who fought for Black history to be studied and respected as a scholarly pursuit. Ella Baker, who organized and fought for civil rights, and she was a major organizer of the civil rights movement. Maya Angelou, Toni Morrison, James Baldwin, who illustrated the Black experience in literature and essays. And Angela Davis, who fought for Black and Indigenous economic and political power, limited policing, and the abolition of prisons. And there were countless others whose names they're too numerous for me to mention, and they're names that we might not ever know, but who were right on the front lines of America's war of Black independence. And yes, much of the work of our Black founders involved the fight for power or against injustice, enslavement, and inequality. By the way, this isn't very different from the work of America's original white founders. But the Black fight for independence is not consolidated in a single document like the Declaration of Independence. Instead, it's written in books and articles and manifestos and letters and narratives, and it's shared in oral traditions like speeches and folk tales and songs, and these, of course, are reminiscent of our African roots. But these sources have not received the respect from white society or even us. To be truthful, we haven't always respected these these sources, but they are legitimate works in Black culture by Black philosophers and ministers, musicians, lawyers, scientists, and writers. And we should never, of course, forget the lessons and teachings of the elders and of the ancestors. Returning back to the words of Dr. King, one of the great problems that the Negro confronts is his lack of power. The fight for equality and freedom is a problem of power, confrontation of the forces demanding change and the forces of power dedicated to the status quo. So on this American Independence Day, there is more to celebrate than the important, though limited, work of the white founders. It was the beginning of a struggle for white and wealthy men. But Black founders have taken up the sword so that our struggle includes the fight for freedom and equality for all Black people, women, indigenous people, poor people, uneducated people, and all other marginalized people. And once we understand that the Declaration of Independence was not originally written to include this wider group of people, we can begin to reimagine and re-envision how to make it so. We can correct the deficient work of the founders. We can correct the glaring flaws and complete their unfinished business. Let's see what we can do. We hold these truths to be self-evident, that all people are created free and equal. They are endowed by their Creator with certain unalienable rights, that among these are, say it with me now, that among these are life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. La lucha continua. The struggle continues. We have talked about a lot today, and there's just a few more things I want to finish up with before we bring some things to the present time. To me, especially right now, it is so important to remember the Black people who worked to end slavery and fight for equality. There's a lot more work to do, but they have done so much. Because of the courage and sacrifice of Black people, every marginalized and oppressed group in America, and there are a lot, have been uplifted and supported. That work ain't done yet either, but it has started. Poor people, women, disabled people, LGBTQIA+ people in community, immigrants, senior citizens, medically needy people, neurodiverse people. So many people have been uplifted by the work of Black Americans. All of these people have benefited from the work of our Black founders. I only mentioned a few of the founders today. There are just so many more, and I'll remember them too in future shows. I'm also loving the idea about a Black Founders Memorial or Black Founders or Black Heroes holiday. Let me know what you think. I'd be very interested to know. Today, I'm bringing it up to the present today because, wow. Today, the Supreme Court invalidated affirmative action. Yep, we lost yet another one of the rights. They're voting, abortion, and now affirmative action. And that's off the top of my head. There's a lot more. And I want to end this discussion with the insightful words of Justice Ketanji Brown Jackson in her dissenting opinion in that major case. Well, I get choked up. I'm angry thinking about it, but I get choked up reading her words. Here they are, and I quote, "The gulf-sized, race-based gaps exist with respect to the health, wealth, and well-being of American citizens. They were created in the distant past, but have been indisputably passed down to the present day through the generations. Every moment these gaps persist is a moment in which this great country falls short of actualizing one of its foundational principles, the self-evident truth that all of us are created equal." End quote. Asante Sana, Justice Jackson. I mean, yeah, you really hit it on. This started a long time ago, but it's still happening today. Asante Sana to our Black founders and heroes for their sacrifice and their vision and their courage. Asante Sana to you for showing up and staying with us. We appreciate you and your presence and your continued support every single day. You really are the reason that we do what we do. You can join us every day to discuss these issues on Instagram at @AmaRobinL. That's Ama_Robin_the letter L. Check out my profile, leave your questions, comments, reflections, and just about anything you want to say. I want to hear from you, and I'm here for you. If you think that other people will be interested in this Black Empowerment Podcast show, then please, please, please send it to them. We got to start talking about these issues, and we got to keep talking about them. Racism never stops, and neither can we. I mean, as they're saying, racism has been kind of an underscoring theme since the Declaration, since the founding of this country, and it's still with us. We can also, though, celebrate our culture, our community, and our connection. And these are more powerful. I always remember that love is more powerful than hate. Always has been and always will be. And if you want to keep discussing or just reading about these issues, then you should definitely subscribe to our weekly newsletter, The Noma Beat. We discuss lots of issues there, so get your dose of Black empowerment every single week. Never a dull moment, but lots of growth moments. You can subscribe at the Espresso Talk Today website at espressotalktoday.com or on Instagram at @AmaRobinL. Just remember those underscores, okay? And the letter L on my profile page. I'm Ama Robin for Espresso Talk Today. And remember, now more than ever, strength, soul, and reparations. Ashe, community.